well known in the industry. And, when customers come in and they're asking for that brand name, and, I'll take this customer, for example, when the tariffs first hit, they had just purchased a very well-known product. A week after, they were like, oh, this is $15 more than I bought it last week. I have my receipt. Can you honor that? And unfortunately, I'm so sorry, these tariffs hit us. So, these are getting passed on to our customers like you. And, all we can say is like, if you want it now is the time to get it before we see another increase like a month later or a week later. We can't predict when these are happening. And, that customer said, all right, heard, let me buy 2 more of that product. I wanted it for my girlfriends. And so that's what we started to notice, that, as customers did see these increases, as long as it's like something trusted, or, even when they're coming to us, like, I can't afford to buy that now, that's more expensive, but what do you have that's an alternative that's still within my price point that I came into shop for today?
Can I add to that? I'll keep interrupting your question. I'm sorry. I think too, this is something that Roger from Sorrel has talked about on a panel at XBIZ last year. Customers have always been price conscious. I started in the stores, and I think that obviously 6 years ago, the landscape was very different. But at some point in a transaction, price will always come up. That being said, I think that another thing that we have to navigate as a retailer is ensuring that our teams understand how to convey to a customer a cheaper product might still be a quality product, but how long is that product going to last you? I have products that I bought 10 years ago that are still good, and I think about the price that I paid for them, and I cut it down per year and per use to the point where I don't remember. It's the point that the price that I paid for it initially at that point is negligible.
So I think, people understand the value. They're probably willing to invest, even in a time where everybody's hurting. Nobody's walking around with a Nokia phone, right? Like, still got the iPhone 17 right here. So, I think it's in any time of business, tariff crazy or not, it's good to have items of all price points so that you can service all consumers that are coming in. But yes, when you have to take an item that's a well-known item and raise it up $50, it's probably a bit painful for the customer. I think for our locations, we see repeat customers, but we see a lot of new customers that they're not familiar to any of the products that we carry. So it's not something they're like, oh, I bought the Wii 5 2 weeks ago, and now it's this price. Kind of like, if Ahmed is going to buy some Jordans, he's going to know, oh, they went up, because he buys them so frequently. So maybe that's on our side. I think we have a virtual audience today, so I just wanted to say, hey, if you do, and just kidding if you don't.
We got some lurkers.
Okay.
We have some lurkers, no comments yet.
So Tori's here, who's joined us, and she has the virtual situation going. And just for the virtual world to know, if there's time at the end and you have any questions, Tori will convey them. You can ask any of the panelists.
Thanks,
You
Megan.
can't ask the moderator, but you can ask panelists. All right. Okay. Practically speaking, for the increases, do you prefer these baked into each item, or do you like them as a line item at the end as a retailer?
I see both sides of it. So I understand that raw material is going to go up, that these costs do have to happen. And, but when I see that extra line item, I'm just like, okay, when can I expect to see this rolled back, if ever? And, a year later, we're still seeing them on some of our invoices. Some of them, quietly went away. And I was like, that's wonderful. Thank you. That's going to help our accounting team. And for us to have a better margin to look at how we're buying things too. I'm trying to think of what else. I forgot my train of thought right now. I'm so sorry.
Me too. What I'll say is this. There was like a earth-shattering silicone increase, silicone lube a few years ago, right? I'm sure anybody that's in the lube business or buys lube knows that. What happened when it came down? Like, people actually came down with prices, and they did price reductions. I know System Joe did price reduction. I know there was several vendors that actually did a price reduction. So I think what you guys are trying to say is, should it come back down, will we expect for that to go away? Or eventually you're just gonna try and wiggle it into the price of the item?
Right, and so, I mean, for us, when we see that like price increase and get that warning, like for us, we are trying to stock up. And so just to get like that best margin, like as early as we can. And that was our strategy like all last year, where we're like, where can we stock up? Like, where do we allocate this budget for that? And we're treating it as like, this is permanent, this is not going back. If it does, that's great news. But we're not expecting it to go down, so we're not planning for that. If we do see it as a separate line item, though, that's something that we're just like, okay, that eventually, that's not permanent. And I don't know how, manufacturers are seeing that or treating it. So I'm curious, what is, for a manufacturer perspective, how do you, like, when do you expect to see it roll back? I know this is a tough economy right now. We don't know what Trump is going to say next. But, how do you, talk to your retailers to say, not only have we increased the cost of the goods, but you're also getting an additional like 2% now on top of your invoice. Like how?
Well, to answer that, there is no crystal ball. I think that's the biggest thing here, right? We don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know what the industry is gonna do. We don't know if these tariffs will ever come down to quote unquote norm, right? Tariffs have been reduced. For us, during that initial onset of tariffs, it was so fluid and so unsustainably. It was so a way to approach it was we had to stay very fluid. So for us, the easiest method was to include a separate line item charge for us to hit you with active price increases per SKU for each model every 30 days, every 60 days, every 45 days. It just was unrealistic for us to chase that. Given where it was, given how heated the arguments with, I mean, we was high as 145%. Now, put that in perspective, a container will cost you $400 to bring in, you're paying over $750,000 just in tariff cost, right? That's real money. That's money that you're never going to see back. So for us, as tariffs will stabilize, yes, we'll probably see a reduction. Given that November was the huge deadline for what's going to happen with trade agreements, we did increase our production to bring in as much as we could at that lower perspective of what we thought was going to be the best margin to us. Our goal was to come back down to what the standard norm is based on the current flow of tariff. Right, tariffs are still in place. 15% for Japan. We're at 20% for baseline for China, and that's 10% baseline, not inclusive of what your standard tariff is, plus the additional tariff. Right, so there is layers to the tariffs. That's when can you approach it? When is it sustainable for us to really know what our true costs are? Until then, it's a game of whack. To be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I think the same thing is with anything. Our challenge, again, there was no one solution that would satisfy both the retailers, the distributors. We tried to do a surcharge, we tried to do a line item, we tried to do increases. But there were so many moving parts and we have so much uncertainty at the time that, again, no matter how we framed it or, presented it to the customers, there's always going to be some blowback. And so I think the uncertainty, we finally got to a point where we said, hey guys, everybody kept asking, is like surcharge going to go away? Is it ever going to get rolled back? Finally got to a point where we just said, guys, it is what it is. This is the business as we know it going forward. And so we're kind of at that point still. We communicated that, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know when they're going to get rolled back. Until then, we have to keep the goods flowing and keep the whole supply chain.
And I'll also add, I feel like you never know what, like, we didn't know COVID was gonna happen, right? You don't know when certain things are gonna happen like this that are gonna impact your business so significantly. So you might have a calendar and a plan to roll out a price increase at the end of the year. And then come the end of the year, you got this happen. So you're already planning and absorbing some cost because you're expecting to have a price increase, another price increase. What I will say on the individual item pricing and the separate line item, pros and cons to both, because when it's on the individual item, it's easy to roll it to the consumer. When it's on it's just the bottom line item, it gives you hope that it's gonna go away. So, you know, I don't know what's better, I guess.
I mean, I can say something that a distributor, we got a lot of complaints when this was ever buying them. Because not all accounting systems are even set up that way. And we ultimately, for the few companies that opted to do it that way, we felt we had to roll it into the price. Everyone else obviously tell them because, you know, it does have to pass through in some way. But we, you know, we couldn't do a lot bottom on the invoice. I carry over 15,000 items. I carry over 150 brands. To do that would have been very difficult and not fair to our customers either. So that's kind of how we opted to move forward to try to accommodate our system, but also really accommodate the customers as well, so that they knew what the real. We didn't want someone to get an invoice, have something on the bottom, and really, especially with carrying so many brands on an invoice, you know, then they have to pass that through per item on their system, and that would have been super challenging.
Okay, we're gonna move on to pricing, margins, and business reality. So let's talk about the pressure point everyone feels, pricing and margins. Rob and Eddie, how have tariffs changed your pricing strategies or margins? Have they influenced decisions around staffing, production scale, or product development?
Yeah, I think definitely for product development, let's talk about that first, right? As we knew these tariffs were completely new to us. They were ever changing, they were ever evolving. So as you start looking at what your starting point is for product, you have something in mind, right? Start off the idea 6 months prior to tariffs. Tariffs roll into it, then you start looking at, well, what is now my cost of that item, right? How is that going to implicate that 20%, the 25%, 45%? Then you start really looking like, is it even worth me bringing this product in at the moment? And so you do have to stall a tactic. You have to hold back and decide whether you want to bring something new at a higher price point than what you originally thought was going to be. If you had a target for MSRP, that's completely changed now because now you're looking at a 45% tariff because what it wasn't there 6 months prior. For us, we have a ordering process that we're doing POs 6 to 7 months out, right? So as these implications were starting to happen to us, we were faced with decisions that were harder because we already had it in place. We already had production out. Now we're adjusting to these tariffs as they were doing so. I started talking to Hitachi on the factory part of this. Listen, we need to slow down production. We need to hold things that it becomes sustainable. Bringing in a container at 145% doesn't make any sense. So we put production on hold. We didn't push things back. We didn't want to kind of delay that, but you also want to keep inventory coming. It was very challenging. For us, we're a small lean team. But for those large manufacturers that carry a large or even a distributor, we carry much more overhead. You start looking at what those additional costs are, right? You start looking at staffing. When you start getting hit with 300,000, 400,000 just in tariffs, you start considering how much of that is someone's salary, right? So the realistic best way I can describe it was an iceberg. For raw retailers, you saw a tip. You saw anything that was above water. For us in the manufacturing, there's a lot of logistics involved to that: staffing, production, ordering processes, additional costs, logistics. Then you're paying additional fees as it was happening, just like COVID. The carrier started taking advantage of that, right? Well, work container would cost me $3,400, now you're looking at $21,000 just in shipping costs. So there's a huge underlayer decisions that have to be made before they even reach the U.S. So there was just a lot of things. It's kind of, it's got a lot of layers, and there was a lot of layers too, and it still continues to be.
Rob, you want to re-ask it?
No, I mean, I think pretty much everything Eddie says, but times that by 20, 30 factories, times that by 15 different lines, and then you're dealing with it. And so the challenges just grew exponentially further away. So I don't think it affected the actual product development. Nothing changed as far as the way we're developing products, but the time frame, like I said, we're already working 6, 9 months ahead on stuff for next year. So that became more challenging. A lot of factories actually, they were doing everything they could to try to try to keep up that problem with the business.
Well, why don't you just buy it somewhere else? No, I'm just
Oh, no, I mean, they did say that. And, so I will say the factories, we're doing everything that they could in their power to try to absorb it, to try to, you know, we've set up a lot of different things for international customers, to try to bypass, drop ship, and, setting up our China warehouse. But for the US customers, domestic, there was really no relief and none of that really helped. So not too much change as far as our development process, but just the time frame and just the execution got more challenging with all the different lines and 3,300 products.
So you guys both address the strategies and margins. What about staffing for you two? That made any differences in your companies?
Like I said, Vibratex, we're pretty lean, so we're going to sustain. There's always going to be worst case scenarios, and we would have plans in place. What does what it look like was scary for a lot of people. Was scary for ourselves. So yeah, staffing is a consideration, but fortunately we're in a position that we're a small team and we're able to move forward with it. We could do some things to help some cost savings, but ultimately, us being smaller, I think was an advantage to that. One thing that Rob kind of triggered me is we also have to explain these tariffs to the factories in China so much you can. They understand what was happening in the US. They weren't getting that sort of information. They weren't privy to what our news networks offer. So you have to have these conversations and have them understand what these implications of tariffs are, why we're slowing down, why we're not ordering the same, why some of those factories had to close temporarily in order to sustain the business. Again, just another way to.
Can I add something to what Eddie just said?
Yeah.
I think obviously, like, we're having to deal with price increases and increases everywhere, so we're not lucky, but in a way that there is a larger national conversation happening around tariffs and that it isn't just affecting our industry. When customers come into our store and staff members are having to tell them why the price of their lubricant or a bullet that they just bought for themselves that they wanted to get for their friend is now more expensive, and the answer is tariffs, they know what that means in a way that they might not necessarily have before.
Okay, so before I move on to the next question, I want you guys to know that I put all my questions in Chat GPT to get an idea of timing, and it was wrong. Just so you guys know, apparently it was. So going forward, I'm gonna ask one or the other, just so we can, because I feel like the questions kind of come to a close at the end, and I think we have 15 minutes left. This is supposed to be 17 minutes in, it's 35. Yeah, just want to lay that out there. IP, you can still drop in whatever you want to say. Stay here all day long. Sorry, Sarah. All right, where are we at here? We are now moving on. We're gonna go with Bonnie on this one. How have tariffs changed pricing strategies, margin, or risk tolerance on the distribution side, especially around inventory forecasting and cash flow?
I mean, on the distribution side, first of all, we definitely had to evaluate all the brands that we carried, all the items that we had as they were coming in, because quite honestly, some products, the pricing would outpace the market. It would be too expensive. So there's items that I saw manufacturers drop, or items that we dropped as a distributor because we knew that just at that price, it wasn't going to sell it in stores. So that's one thing. It does make you look at everything very carefully, and you have to look at the margins of pretty much everything that you're doing. Because as these are, we did try to stock up before all of the mass price increases of 145%. And we recommended that our stores do the same during that time. I mean, the reality is tariffs are a challenge for everyone. And, on the manufacturing side, since I do have a very small brand, we, like Eddie said, we actually put a halt on bringing anything in during that time at 145% tariff. It just didn't make sense to, continue to move forward when we knew that it was a volatile situation, and most likely, hopefully, the tariffs would go down, and they did go down. But we did try to stock up as well because you know, on the distribution side, we realized, hey, everyone is putting a halt on buying inventory from China. All the manufacturers, they stopped too. So we started getting back orders on certain items. And so we really tried to stock up actually, because we knew that if they put a halt on production, even if the product was almost done and they just didn't ship it, we knew that once they turned the water back on and it started to ship, it still was going to take time. Because it has to ship and go on the water, and then it has to go to our border, and it has to go through customs on the border, and it's an entire process. So mostly we try to stock up, understanding that most of the manufacturers put a halt on shipping their products.
All right, we're gonna move on over to Ruth. Have tariffs forced changes to pricing strategy, margins, or even decisions at retail? You can defer if you need to.
So I can, when it comes to the pricing on products and pricing, I'm gonna defer to IP, but I can talk about the operations. So at PC, I am in charge of like hiring to like how store hours, like I wear many hats. And so, you know, with tariffs, you know, in the middle of last year, the owner and I had to meet and discuss, you know, how is this going to affect how late we're open, especially in our Los Angeles location. You know, now we're open until 2 a.m. 3 days a week. Do we need to roll that back now? Are people still buying the same volume that they were at the beginning of the year? And, you know, now are we making cuts? And so I have to look at all of our staff and say, you know, does this still make sense for us? And, you know, we had, you know, it's sad to say, but we had 2 rounds of layoffs last year. And that was not a fun decision. And so, you know, with that, like I've had to, you know, expand myself to be like, okay, now that we've made this cut, how are we able to, you know, use these staff members or even myself to fill in these gaps for us? And at the end of the year, you know, we had that conversation again of like, sorry, not end of the year, but you know, when it came to, you know, healthcare and like enrollment time, you know, I like, you know, at PC, they really take care of us there with, you know, with our healthcare plans. And, you know, the owner and I had that conversation. He's like, how do we scale that back to keep operations going? And we had already discussed the possibility of closing down one of the New York stores. And so that was a big conversation where we're like, okay, well, with healthcare, you know, we can scale back 2% on what we cover for staff, and that still gives them a good cushion. And, you know, for us, like looking at it, the costs were anywhere between $10 and $50. And we're like, that's a reasonable. And staff were like, okay, at least it wasn't like 15%. And when it came to the closure of the store, deciding which one it was, like it was a heartbreaking decision when it came down to the West Village. After being around there for over 50 years and just such an iconic legacy store. And, you know, our staff is very much heartbroken over that, but they understand that in order for us to keep operations flow and continue to be successful. And, you know, we've said we want to reopen at some point. We don't know when that will be, or if that will be a different city next time. And, you know, what we don't like to keep part-time people. And so we want to have full-time people. And for now, with the closure of the store, like I'm happy to say that out of 4 locations, we only have 1 part-time person that come March, they're going to be able to become full-time. And so it's just, we're trying to move things around, do things differently. And it's been a fun, complicated issue. I'm sure that everyone has experienced this, like, do you let go of certain people? How do you reduce things to keep your business going? As far as pricing, do you want to jump in?
Yes, and I might be answering your next question, Megan, about categories.
Feel
Is
free.
that okay? Okay. Yeah, so as I said before, there are some brands where we had to, especially jumping off of what Ruth said regarding staffing. When it comes to a price increase, aside from the price increase itself, there are a lot of things that go into how am I going to implement this? When am I going to implement this? What time am I going to implement this? How many SKUs am I going to do at once? How far ahead? How much notice can I give my staff? So there's a lot of thinking that we have to do with that. And also we have to consider the urgency of it. In terms of categories, there were some categories where our margins had already supported us to stay at a lower price point. And with this, we had an opportunity to adjust that a little bit to make up for some products and specialty categories where our margins might have been a little bit lower. So those are some of the, does that answer your question? Is that what you were looking for?
I think, you know, obviously, from everybody up here, there's been a downsizing of staff and team members, and that hurts. Nobody likes to fire anybody, unless you're an asshole. You don't like to fire people, and I certainly don't. And not only that is when you say, okay, can we lose 3 people in the warehouse? Can we lose 2 people off the sales floor? Your quality control starts to change as well. So there is a ripple effect. When you have a store like theirs, they're obviously much nicer stores. And part of the reason people shop there is that customer experience. Well, if you have 4 guests in the store and 2 sales associates, somebody's not being tended to. That means somebody's writing a negative Yelp review that they didn't speak to me, things like that. So it is really hard to reduce staff. I'm sure you all know when you anticipate this is what I need for the amount of guests that I'm going to see or the amount of customers that I have. And you know, in your guys' situation, to scale that back, I'm sure a lot of people wearing a lot more hats than they were originally, and also not getting paid anymore for it because money's so tight. So it's a painful situation all around, it sounds like. And I'm not, how about the audience? Have you guys felt any of that hurt at all? By a show of hands, has anybody known anybody that's been relieved of their, none of you guys know anybody that's been fired? I need to make friends with you guys.
I feel like checking this.
Cam, you don't? I see you back there. You didn't leave. I mean, it's affecting everybody.
Megan, it feels like that scene in Mean Girls where the principal is like, have any of you been personally affected by reduced hours?
They're like, all right, moving on, since the audience doesn't want to participate. Fucking rude. I pushed for you guys, not anymore. Not anymore, Abe. Just kidding.
Not anymore.
Abe, how have tariffs changed your pricing strategy?
Thanks so much. Everything's been changing from, again, what we bring it in, you know, from, you know, like expansions and trying to find deals and trying like different things, you know, like for me, like, I'll be looking for options, you know, like compare price. If I can find deals and people that so have overstock to bring in new stuff, so we got rid of some old stuff, so trying to find deals that I can find that well, so kind of pass them to the, you know, consumers.
So I don't have anything great about deals in here. I don't know how many of you heard it, but I love Abe over there. But I want to say that you're damn right on that, is trying to find deals. The gray area of that is like everybody has a deal right now. So you only have so much cash flow and you only have so much space. So then it becomes which deal is the best deal, you know, and a lot of forecasting on what I can sell the most down the road. All right,
Can I add to that real quick?
yes, you can. You might even go back to Abe.
I mean, we're doing the same thing in stores. So like we're looking at, like we're walking the floor every week and seeing, LA's our most like high volume store. So we can literally see the gaps over there and we're like, okay, so we need to fill this space. So why don't we look at the closeout deals that our partners have? And while it's like product that we initially passed on, we're like, you know what? The margins make sense right now. The price might make sense for the customer. We don't have to go that full MSRP that it once was. And so we're still providing that service to them while still keeping the store afloat.
Thanks, Ruth. So we have about 4 minutes left. So if any of you guys prepared and printed it out.
Question of that.
Yeah,
Question of that.
I have a question in the back.
When I'm telling you we don't have any time to go through 2 pages, you have a question. Here,
Question of that.
come bring it up here. Let's put it on the line.
So some brilliant person on P3 back in March talked about their stores putting on a flat rate percentage surcharge on invoices. Which I thought, I said they were a brilliant person, I didn't say who. It was like, but I'd be curious if you implemented that, because we actually did implement a surcharge. And we started to explain to our
Why is he
customers.
leaving? Rude. Sorry.
Rather than the customer having to place one product that might have been $20 and a similar product that was $50 because of the tariff, we just did an across the board, you know, charge at the bottom, initially we tried to call it tariff fee and the sales tax, that thing, and we changed it to convenience fee because the word tariff was being politically charged. You know, they thought, on one political party or the other. So when we explain that to customers, we've had success with that. I'm just curious if you guys have implemented that in forward.
So we did not, and we put a lot of thought into it and a lot of sleepless nights thinking on how we were gonna do that and if we were gonna do that. And we made some different decisions within our business that worked a little better for us. Not to give you all our secrets, but, for example, you know, we price things out accordingly, so we get it for this price, it goes into a spreadsheet. This is the markup, it's the standard markup, and we round it to 99, we put it on the floor, right? So some of these items, 67.99, 72.99, 44.99, things like that. So what we decided to do was we felt that a consumer, if they're willing to spend 66.99, 69.99 is not making any difference to them. If they're willing to spend 42, they go to 44. So we're still doing it, and this is like 5 months long, price changing. We basically moved everything up rounding to either 4 or 9 to kind of offset these various fees. So we don't take all fees and put them right down to the consumer. We do try and take in as much as we can, but we felt spreading it out across all items rather than saying, okay, this company went up, this company went up. I mean, I will tell you, there was a company that was like, we're having a 50% increase, and I'm like, hey, it's a pleasure doing business with you, good luck. You know what I mean? Like, we have a struggle with selling some of the product at the current price. I can't do that. We can't do that, especially when consumer or brands that are very similar to yours are not doing that. So we can't do something like that. But we didn't end up implementing that. But if anybody wants to, we can. Sarah, how are we on time?
Stuff like 10 minutes.
Where else we
Oh,
go?
okay. Something, there's a ball
Yeah.
somewhere.
We're on vacation.
All right, great. So I'm gonna skip some of these, just so you guys know, so if you're going through your notes, I'm gonna try and get to, some of the more, I think, you know, more whatever they are. Okay, so we're gonna move to winners, losers, and category shifts. Not every product category is affected equally. This is Rob and Andy. Which categories and materials are most vulnerable? Silicone toys, electronics, BDSM, hardware, packaging, heavy parts, and why? And actually, this is Rob.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry.
For us, the challenge was because the range is so big. There were different tariffs on different materials, metal stuff, aluminum stuff, some of them, like you said. And so that just kept getting worse and worse, you know, as the situation went on and as it progressed. So, there are just certain, you know, there are certain things that we knew that, like you said, our customers aren't able to support that. It's, you know, sex, it's bigger than larger furniture. We specialize in the big dungeon stuff. The tariffs on that stuff is just, you know, insane. That said, we still have to continue making that because our customers, you know, that's what they're looking to XR for. And so for us, it's been business as usual as far as the product, you know, product development and keep things moving and keep the supply chain moving and keep the goods flowing. But there are definitely certain categories of our items, anything metal, you know, those high price items that have been very challenging for us.
So
We're not getting out of the business, we're just change the way, maybe change the customers or who buys what from it. So.
And when you say anything with metal, I think firsthand, we all think, well, it only affects electronics. And that's just clearly not the case. We know a lot of lube companies that they like make their lube here in this country, but the lid comes from China. You know, it's just so many different layers. We're gonna go to fine item. Have you seen shifts in competitiveness? Are some brands gaining ground simply because they're less exposed to tariff impacted inputs, and are there brands that are less exposed?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty much across the board. I think how it's been handled by different manufacturers has had an impact. So like you spoke to it, if somebody came to us and said there's a 50% increase, we'd say, geez, unless your product is a necessity, we're probably going to struggle, especially if it wasn't selling. So I would say that where it's changed for us is definitely the consumer is more price conscious. So we need to have as much focus on price conscious items. So it's definitely changed our SKU assortment. But I think also, as we can see, there are people that are still spending money on a higher price point item. But you have to have both. So it's definitely changed our assortment more. I wouldn't say it's one category over another. It's been pretty much across the board. And again, from a Canadian perspective, we had counter tariffs, so that was also causing lube was a major headache for us in Canada. So that's another dimension that we were dealing with.
Okay, we're gonna go to supply chain and sourcing. And that's why I said it to you earlier, but then I realized you said you didn't read any of this ahead of time, so you didn't get the joke. Damn it. All right, one of the biggest questions we hear is, why not just move production? So we're gonna go to Eddie and ask Eddie, how have tariffs changed your sourcing decisions or supplier relationships?
For us, we've been with Hitachi now for 20-something years. It's actually helped strengthen some of those relationships for us. Like I said, there was a little bit of painful at first, explaining to them and to understand where we stood as far as these tariffs were ever changing. But as far as someone like Rob's position or any other manufacturers, it's not as easy as someone thinks to go ahead and change the factory. If you're looking at anywhere between lead time between 6 to 24 months. You got to find the appropriate channel, you got to find the appropriate samples, mold costs, logistics that come involved with it. Testing, obviously, you're going to have your own testing certifications, UTL, UL, air transport. Yeah. This is the true, iceberg situation that we have to deal with when considering possibly manufacturing. The waterproof was manufactured in Japan, continues to be pays the heritage to where Magic Wand came from. But even that process wasn't necessarily until 3 to 4 months. That process was well into 12 to 14-month process before where those fully manufactured to it. Argument after that is currently 7 to 8 months, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's just not, hey, let's just change the factory and try to find something cheaper. That also is going to have implications on the quality control of the pad, right? Even a small hit in the water can change your product from someone loving it, someone hating it. Right, changing, so killing silicone, same situation, right? All these changes you have to factor into, is it worth it to change factor at that time? And obviously, we're trying to be as competitive as it is, it's hard for them to find those channels that are going to be truly that brand, right? Without being able to just go through those roles to somebody else at a cheaper discount. So
I also think probably a company that's smaller line, but longer standing. You guys probably have customers that would notice when a button changes or something silly like that because you have such brand loyalty. So you probably don't have much opportunity to change too many things going on.
Correct.
Just a fun fact, my sister's here with me today. She is sitting right there. My son attends college about an hour and a half from here, so he's here now. So he has to get up and leave, so go ahead. He texted. All right, we're gonna move on to the next question. If you were to move production somewhere, realistically, how long does it take to move production for an adult product, and what risks come with that transition? Rob, let me go through them.
Yeah, what did you say?
What do you say? Listen, say it. All right.
It's not even an option, but just try to meet the factories on most of these items from the molds, not even owning the molds, get your molds back. There's so many factors that go into it, and arranging just something that doesn't even have an option to think about that. So
I'm assuming it's a multi-million-dollar type of thing.
So honestly, it really wasn't an option for us. It decided not to get.
So we are going to look at the long-term outlook. So I'd like to do a quick round robin: manufacturer, distributor, then retail. And you guys sound more. If tariffs stay in place for the next 5 to 10 years, what does that mean for pricing, innovation, and sustainability? Rob, you're all about the answer. All right, you have to give your mic as well.
the reality is we don't know how long this tariff should stay in place.
I didn't excuse you.
I'm sorry.
I'll stay if you need me.
Now, we don't know how some tariffs it's like for, and we have to adjust for that. We have to understand that this may be our possible new norm, at least for the next several years. What that means, obviously, if we know that these tariffs are not going to be as stabilized to where they are, then we look at where we can kind of readjust our pricing structure. Again, now you start considering if you want to bring in a new product, what does that look like for you? What is that cost going to be? Does it have your MSRP or where you want it to come into? But there is no crystal ball. There is no right or wrong answer at the moment, to be honest with you guys. We just don't know what's going to happen. We can try to plan for it. We can try to kind of adjust. But at the end of the day, we're going to be adjusting the big thing and kind of analyzing things as they come.
I think for us, rather than like trying to move factories like you were talking earlier, it's the next step for us is working with the factories ahead of time and then cooperating with the ones that are making it easier for us to do what we're trying to do. And so we got to a point where, hey, we have these items from this factory, there's no way we can move it, but if we're gonna make a new range or a new brand, new categories, we're definitely, there's a lot of different things that we're considering now before we're even gonna, start that project with the factory to make sure that they can actually, support that. So I think our choice of who we work with going forward, the tariffs have a lot to do.
Bonnie, I'm gonna shift your question a little bit, even though I know you did the research, you did your homework, and throw out your answers. It's gonna shake things up. I want to ask you this in a different light. So I know that back in the heydays, the big manufacturers, they would, at an AMBI, they would have 300, 400 items in their release. Now I think they're shrinking, right? Do you think that the items being released are more thought out, therefore possibly more innovative instead of just a straight carbon copy of the Ruth to the left with a different color again? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a mixed bag. I think that some people, yes, are doing that, and some people, I see there's been a shift, and you see it as a good thing. Maybe my top 5 brands have moved around a little bit between who's number 1 and who's 5, based on some of this. I do think quality is not. When I got in the industry, I had a vendor actually say, "This shocked me." I mean, this was in 2003, and they're like, "Yeah, we make our products, but we got a 90-day warranty, and we do that on purpose because it breaks in the 4th month, and we get the reorder." And I was horrified. That doesn't really happen today, because thank God. So. What was the other part of the question?
I'm gonna actually pass the next part because that was innovation. I'm gonna give the next part to Ivan. We're gonna go with Ivan on if the tariffs stay in place for the next 5 to 10 years. What does that mean for pricing?
Yes, I mean, I think we expect more or less that it's going to, we call it tariffs, it's just another form of tax. Rarely does pricing come back down. What it means for us, the distributor, is the manufacturing partners that we work with and prioritize are the ones who really understand that it's about helping the retailer sell the product. So at the end of the day, it's what can the consumer afford to pay for the product? And I think along the way, if you look at this panel, nobody's put 100% increase. So everybody's eaten part of the margin along the way. And for us, it's being understanding that this is likely to be an uncertain scenario for at least the next 3 years. It's having better communication with manufacturers to retailers. So as a distributor, we absolutely expect it to stay in place. And it's, like I mentioned before, it made us look a little bit differently at product assortment, but also really working with the manufacturers and making sure the manufacturers understand that you can't just put up prices through distribution to retailers and then undercut on another channel, because that also doesn't work so well. So I think it's really supporting the entire ecosystem of pricing.
Ruth and Ikea, I'd love to know what you both would like to add. No changes in 5, 10 years. What do you do? 3, 2, 1, go.
I mean, just to reiterate what Ivan was saying, like, the retailer does have to partner with the manufacturers now more than ever. Especially on like these higher price items that like, and are tried and true, believe in, but like how do you convince your customer that, to buy that product at that premium level? And so now, when we look at our aging inventory and, we're like, we've been sitting on this for the last like 12 months now. And, we're past that point because, it slipped off our radar because with such a shrinking team, it's like, oh, we did not look at that earlier in the year. What do we do now? And, it's been great because, our manufacturers are a lot open to that conversation now where like, oh, you're still sitting on that? How can I help you as a manufacturer move that now? And, let me, here's the credit and let's use it as like a gift of purchase now. Let's make sure that your average transaction now is over this dollar amount. And so they're helping us find a ways to either incentivize those for customers or even with our own staff, if they're noticing that, hey, you're buying less these last 3 months compared to like last year or even in the last 6 months. So what can we do to change that? Do we need to have either a retraining? Do we incentivize our staff? And, on top of this, we do like these bingo cards. And so we're looking at our product categories and saying like, hey, you know what, your anal category is suffering. So let's look at these vibrating toys under like this price point and let's say if you can sell X amount, this is what you're going to get as compensation at like the next month. And so that has kept our staff motivated. So for me, like if they're here to stay, like we're just working with our manufacturers a lot more closely.
Yeah, I think Megan, you were the one to say this earlier. The first to make the move pays the biggest price, pays the highest price, biggest price. But I think too, because of the way different vendors rolled out the effects of the tariffs, it gave us the opportunity to prepare for the future and better prepare our teams, regardless of if that was a per item. I'm scared to say I feel confident, obviously because of the volatility and potential for anything to happen. We have to be like pretty protective and like ready. I feel better than I did 8 months ago.
I mean, I think one of the key takeaways from all of this is everybody's ability to adapt as things move and as things move behind the scenes, under the iceberg, wherever they're moving, just trying to figure out a way to adapt, trying to figure out a way to work as a retailer closer with my distributors or my manufacturers on what we do different, how we think outside of the box, what we can do for the team, things like that. It's a lot, and I feel like sometimes things like this are good because it makes us do something different. It makes us get a little bit out of our comfort zone, and sometimes good things come from it, and we learn from it. Just to wrap things up, tariffs aren't theoretical for the industry. They shape what gets made and what gets stocked and what customers can afford. So I just want to thank our panelists today. I appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate the audience for sticking around. Resume, and I won't call you out if you stand up. Unless you're Abe or Kim. Oh, she already leave. Oh, right. He's having a text right now.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, guys.
Let's go.
Let's go get her. Oh, sorry. Act like you like each other.
I'll just